A man loves his sweetheart the most, his wife the best, but his mother the longest. Irish proverb. All right, good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. For tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so late, because it's definitely not early. What's going on, folks? Well, as if you watched the show this morning, you know that I promised you a 9 o'clock show, and then I am not going to have a show tomorrow. I had a guest lined up. Unfortunately, they had to cancel at the last minute. We are going to reschedule. And so I had to make a decision. I was like, all right, well, do I flip the tables and have a show tomorrow morning and then not one tonight, which would be the exact opposite of what I said this morning? Or do I just continue on and I do something else? And it was kind of last minute. So I was like, oh, man. So initially I put out a post and I said, all right, well, let's see if there's any dads out there that might respond pretty quickly. I didn't really expect any. So, you know, here we are. We're going to talk about something else. I don't have any guest, and that's okay. But I'm going to do my best to keep my word. And if I say I'm going to do a show at 9 p.m., well, by golly, here we are. So what are we going to talk about? So this morning, the show was, it was about men needing sex, right? And, you know, that and more. And so I went through this whole thing, like there's a video and it was like, you know, men don't need sex, you know, you won't die without it, blah, 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 right? And there was like all this argument, debate, and it was like the battle of the sexes. And so I weighed in on it this morning. And then this afternoon I saw a video and I was like, now it wasn't a video like after the fact. I mean, it could have been like from 3 years ago, but I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, men, no. So being Liberty Dad, I gotta weigh in on this. All right, so let's take this video. And look, tonight, you know, we're gonna do a video. We're gonna do a show tonight, but it may be a short show. We'll see. You know, I don't have a whole lot planned, but guys, really, let's watch this video.
Who comes first, your mom, your daughter, or your wife? Mom, daughter, wife. Daughter.
Okay. So the question is, who comes first? Your mom, your daughter, or your wife? Right? Man, I paused this perfectly. Now, I don't know who this woman is. She's doing a response video to a video, right? She's doing a response video, so I'm doing like a response video. But I'm not really responding to her. I'm kind of just jumping on board and giving a man's perspective, right? And she doesn't really go too in-depth here, but just listen to what some of these guys say. Just listen.
Wife replaceable. Okay. Oh, wow, replaceable. Daughter, if I'm on good terms with my wife, then wife. Daughter's at one, okay. Uh-oh.
Daughter, mom, wife.
Daughter, mom, wife?
Because, you know what I'm saying? You can always find another wife.
I was raised by a single mother, so my mom's got to come first. Then my daughter. Then your daughter. Then your wife. Then my wife.
Oof. This might...
Look, in my heart here, I'm feeling this woman's facial expressions because I'm like, I'm there with you, ma'am. I am totally there with you. Dudes, really? Like, now, look, I know how let's be honest about some of these, you know, these man on the street videos. If I go out and I ask a question and, you know, the whole point of a man on the video, you know, a man on the street video is that you're getting a reaction that's going to get some attention. So you're not going to put all the good answers necessarily. All right. You might, depends on the nature of the question. So I understand that this clip is, you know, like there might have been other men who answered what I would say correctly. But the fact that here's what I say about these man on the street videos. Because a lot of people are like, yeah, but they just pick out all the ones that are dumb and then they compile them together and then they put them out and then we all laugh at them, and maybe that's not really, you know, the sentiment. And there is some truth to that. However, I want you to think of it this way. If I go out and I ask a question, and let's say I have to spend 7 hours asking people this question in order for me to get enough people to answer incorrectly, quote unquote incorrectly, whatever the nature of the question is, so that I can put together this video, then it doesn't really make the man on the street videos worthwhile to me. So it's only worthwhile if you can rack up enough of these answers to make the segment that you want with a short amount of time. Like if I have to spend like 8 hours to get 5 responses, that's, I have to really weigh my time. But if I only have to spend an hour to get 5 responses, well, that's different, right? I only spent an hour. Now I can cut up the video and I got 5 responses that I can throw out on YouTube or wherever, right? So do you see how this works? So we should always be concerned when we see these, and we should, well, let me back up. You shouldn't necessarily always be concerned, okay? Because sometimes they do ask tough questions, and maybe you don't know the answer, and that's okay. Like if they ask you, what are the 3 branches of government? We should be hard pressed to find people that don't know the answer. Okay, you won't be, but you should. But if you say, hey, can you name all of the Supreme Court justices? Well, that's a little tougher, right? And so I could, like if people were like, I don't know, and if you were able to in an hour get enough video footage to cut it up and show that people didn't know the answer, I'm like, I might be a little more sympathetic to that. Like, okay, maybe you don't know all Supreme Court justices. Like you're trying to, go to work and take care of your family, do sort of, all these things, so it varies depending on the question. Now, this question, I think that, the quote unquote wrong answer, which we'll get into in a moment, should have been hard pressed to find, but apparently it wasn't. So let's continue and listen to what she has to say about it.
Be a scorchingly hot take, but not one of those men answered that question correctly.
She is absolutely correct. Not a single man answered that correctly.
Marriage, your spouse always has to come first, because that's the only appropriate way to raise children, with the expectation that their spouse should put them first, and in a stable, loving household with low chance of divorce. And beyond that, I don't really know how to explain this phenomenon of men and their moms being unhealthily attached at the hip when they are grown up. I actually had a guy tell me once that I will never be as important to him as his mom.
That's weird. A dude literally told her she will never be more important than his mom. That's crazy.
Years into a relationship. And I don't think he meant that in a negative way. I'm glad he had a great relationship with his family. But if you are discerning spending the rest of your life with someone and your mom still ranks on the priority list, then you really aren't ready for the type of commitment that marriage requires, in my opinion.
Her opinion's correct. That's insane. I'm not even sure how. Like, it's hard to process this idea that men would say this. Now, I don't have a daughter, so I can't answer the question as asked necessarily. I mean, I can. My answer would be whether I have a daughter or not, even if you said, your wife, your mom, your son. My answer would be my wife, my son, or if a daughter if I had one, or children if I had multiple, then my mom. Okay? Let me repeat that. Wife, children, mom. That's your order, or you can call it. You can go with parents. Okay, if you want to consider your dad as well. That's not the question that was asked. Okay, that is the proper order. So let's talk about why. Presumably, you marry somebody that you plan on spending a very long life with. 30 years, 40 years. I mean, I know people get divorced, but that's not your goal. Nobody gets married and they're like, clock's ticking. That divorce will be coming soon. Like, that's not how people think. Like, it happens. But that's not what you're thinking. You're like, man, we're going to be married forever. We're going to grow old and die together. That's the goal, right? you don't say, I'm going to grow old and die with my mom, guys. You say that you're going to grow old and die with your wife. You don't even say you're going to grow old and die with your kids. You're supposed to die before your kids. That's the goal, right? We hope that our kids outlive us, and our parents hope that we outlive them. And so, because of that, because you're spending all of your time, well, okay, let me back up. Maybe not all of your time. You're spending a great deal of your time, like the majority, with your wife. Okay? And you're doing things that you don't do with your mama. Okay? Top of the list there, sexy time. You damn well better not be doing that with your mama. Okay? But you're sharing bills. You're sharing a house. You're raising children. Right? You're confiding in each other. There are things, my mama is not alive, but if she was, there would be things for which I would tell my wife that I might not tell my mother. All right? Those would normally be things that are specific to the marriage, but, so it's not, it's not, like if I was having a struggle with something, I might confide in my wife. I wouldn't necessarily confide in my mom, but it might. It depends on what it is, but ultimately the idea should be that you first reach out to your wife. Now, there might be a time where, hey, you call your mom, like, hey, I'm going to give a contrived answer here. So maybe you're trying to figure out a recipe that, and I'm not playing this like sexist game, like, oh, only women cook. I'm just saying, like, maybe there's something for which you call your mom and ask. You're like, hey, mom, I got a question. Like, that's fine. There are times where maybe your mom might get first dibs on the call. You know what I mean? So, but ultimately, for the really important things, you should be confiding in your spouse. And your wife should be the same way. Your wife should say, husband, children, parents. And if you are not saying that, your marriage is not in a good place. I'm sorry, I'm not a counselor, but I'm telling you, that's not a good place for your marriage to be. And it's really funny that I saw this video today, this afternoon, after this morning show, because this morning show was, do men need sex? And the answer was yes, not yes as in they need it because they'll die without it, but they need it as part of a good, healthy relationship, right? Yes, they do, and more. Please go check that out. That was episode, 566. So go check out that episode. Okay. It was just this morning. And it was a good, fun episode. And I break it all down, but I want you to think about something. There's a lot of men out there that are struggling with like what we might call a sexless marriage. Okay. Well, why do you think some of you might be having a problem in that area? Could part of the problem, or at least for some of these men, be that you're prioritizing your mom? You're not really giving it all to your spouse. The person that should be one of the people that you're closest to, and perhaps, when you last close your eyes, that's the person you should, in theory, see. When my mom passed in 2016, I was not present. My mom lived in a different state. Now, that last year, I was fortunate enough to work with a company that allowed where I was a web developer, so it was relatively easy for me to work remotely. And so what I did was I would just like, hey, I'm going to go and see my mom every time, like, something happened. She was dying of cancer. And every time something, like just kind of spooked me, I was like, I got to go see my mom. And my wife was very patient with me. And, and I left like 4 times. I visited my mom 4 times in that year. Right. And it was because my mom was important to me. And there's nothing wrong with that. Right. And so I wanted to make sure I got the maximum amount of time with my mom because I knew that she was dying of cancer. So I was like, all right, I want to get some time in there with her. And so I went and saw her. But I couldn't be with her the whole time. I have a family. Now, at the time, it was just my wife. and we had a dog, but I don't know if I would count the dog quite that important compared to my mama. Like, you know, somewhere down the line, you know, it's like, so if you have a dog, then hopefully, you know, in addition to spouse, child, parents, maybe then you say like friends and dog. But I guess if you want to say dog before friends, I you know, fine. Okay, I'm good with that. Right? But the dog should definitely not be before any of the other family members. You know, so I went and I visited my mom. But when she last closed her eyes, I wasn't there. You know who was? My dad. Because that's where he was supposed to be. Right by her side till the very end. And to this woman's point, like, this is, I think she mentioned in the video, you're teaching your children how they should behave. You're teaching your children what they should expect. I want my son, when he grows up, and let's say he gets married, you know, I mean, I'm presuming, you know, but the likelihood is that he'll grow up and he'll get married. And he's going to leave the family. My wife will probably shed a few tears. I'll wave him goodbye and be like, all right, good luck, buddy. You got this, right? And then he's going to go and he's going to have his wife and they're going to make their own family. And I will expect that he prioritizes his family, his direct family, over his mom and dad. Now, could you find some exceptions? Yeah, you could find some exceptions. You could be like, well, DL, what if? This is where people like to go, right? They're like, what if my daughter and my wife are in the house and it's burning down? Okay, well, in that case, you might have to make a different decision. Okay? So that's fine. But ultimately, at the end of the day, in general, you should be picking your spouse first. Because you and your spouse are supposed to be leading the family. You can't lead the family properly if you're like, all right, well, my wife comes second to my kids. Okay, well, then that means that the child is now getting priority over the adult who is supposed to be raising them. How can you show a united front if you're not united? Like, you see the problem here? And some of those guys' answers, like if I'm on good terms with my wife, like, what? Okay, look, I've been married 12 years. And yes, there have been moments where my wife and I were not on good terms. Moments. Not like days, okay? Moments. We're mad at each other, okay? She's still my wife. I'm still picking her. And now that we have a child, if there comes a day where, or a moment, not really a whole day, but a moment, and there might be a day, there might be a day where we're just both butting heads and we're in a bad mood and, you know, we're not on good terms that day. We're just, you know, grumpy. Okay, fine. Still picking her. Like, it's still my wife. There's still the day before and the day after. You know, like, that's a moment in time. So this idea that that you would say, if I'm on good terms. No. Here's the thing. My son, he's your typical little boy. He loves his mommy, right? He's like, mommy. Like, you know, there are times when he calls for his daddy, but there are, like, I think probably, if I had to guess, 2/3 of the time he calls for his mommy. Like, when it's time to go to bed, he's always like, mommy, will you tuck me in? He, like, never asked me to tuck him in. And I'll say, like, I'll go up and tuck you in. He'll be like, no, I want mommy. That's fine. Like, that's what he's supposed to be doing, right? Like, he's supposed to be stuck on his mama. But, you know, we call those the apron strings, right? And even though I'm technically the cook in the house, I'm the one that wears the apron. But, you know, you get it. You get the point here. So, but eventually he's going to grow up and we cut those apron strings just like we cut the umbilical cord. I mean, it's more figurative with the apron strings than it is with the umbilical cord. But that's the whole point. A boy has to learn to separate from his mama and grow up and be a man. That's how you become a man. And it's weird because, like, you get all these guys, you get these incels out there and they're whining and crying. They're like, oh, all these women want so much from me. And it's almost like they just want to run home and cry to their mama and stick their thumb in their mouth. Like, dude, grow up. And I know I'm being a bit tough on you, but perhaps you need to hear it. This is insane. It should be very difficult for somebody to find, like go out and like say, I'm going to ask a bunch of people this question, who are you going to put first? Your wife, your daughter, your mom, which one comes first? It should be hard to find somebody that says they're going to pick their mom first. And if your daughter's a little girl, I could sort of understand if you make a mistake and you say your daughter. Sort of. Okay? Because I get it. Girls tend to be very attached to their daddy, who's also attached to them. Boys get attached to their mama, who's attached to them. Obviously, there's some cross there, like a mama will be attached to her daughter and a dad will be attached to his son. But if you want to look for the stronger connections, typically what you see is you see the mom and the son, the dad and the daughter, right? That's typically what you see. So I could kind of understand if a guy makes a boneheaded decision and then you're like, dude, really? And then you just like spend like 1 minute explaining and he's like, you know what, you're right. I was just thinking about my daughter. She's like 7 years old and she's so sweet, and so I could kind of understand where if a dad made a mistake, right? But really, we should be teaching our young boys, we should be teaching our young men, we should be teaching other men that, hey, it is time to grow up and it's time to leave your mama and then go make a life. And like literally, like figuratively and literally, go make a life with her, like together, and then actually make life, like create life. And by doing this, you will create healthy children that grow up. And like that one guy, he's like, well, my mom was a single mom. And so what? You're a grown-ass man. Act like it. So what that your mom, like, I think it's admirable that she presumably did a good job. I think it's admirable that he loved his mama. You should love your mama. My God. My mom, when she died in 2016, it crushed me, okay? She was very important to me. However, my wife came first, right? The only time that you could accuse me of not doing that, and it's not even really true, but I'll kind of give you an example. The only time you could kind of accuse me of not putting my wife first was actually in my first marriage. And it was weird, as a weird dynamic. My ex-wife, her and my mom got along fine, and then somehow after we got married, they stopped getting along. I never really understood that. And so, and they would kind of quarrel back and forth a little bit. They would just kind of poke at each other. And then they would each come to me to complain about the other one. And so I'm like, now the way I looked at it, I was like, both of you are guilty here. You're sniping at her, you're sniping back at her. When you come in nice, you're being snippy. When you come in nice, you're being snippy. Like, both of you need to knock this off and figure this out. And so that's what I told him. I was like, I didn't pick sides. I just was like, look, you guys are asking me, I'm going to give you my objective opinion. My objective opinion is, in this particular case, both of you are wrong. And each one of you needs to figure out what you're doing and deal with your own self. My dad was like, son, he was trying to tell me, he's like, son, he's like, you don't really want to get in the middle of it. And I'm like, hey, they coming to me, so they're going to get my answer. That's how this works. Like, I've always been this way. You come to me and you ask me, you better be prepared for the answer that you're going to get. And you may not like it. Okay. And so that's the only time where I would have been potentially accused of prioritizing my mother over my wife, but I really didn't, because I actually told both of them they were wrong. So, but otherwise, I've always held this. I'm 47 now. I got married in my mid-20s, and I understood at that time, hey, I'm a young guy. I'm still kind of dumb, but it's time to be a man, and, I had some growing up to do, but even still, I had that figured out. And if you had asked me which one comes first, I would have told you my wife comes first. Another what, like I think I told you the what if, like, what if my children, what if there's danger, you might, you might say, okay, well, you might have to rationalize and make a decision based on whatever information is available at the time, and that's fine. I can kind of understand that. I'm not going to fault anybody for that. But ultimately, what you're doing when you pick your mom is you're telling your family they're not as important. That's what you're telling them. You're like, hey, think about this. I believe that a man is supposed to be the head of the household. Now, I don't mean the dictator head that walks around barking orders and saying, wife, make me a sandwich, and, kid, get me a beer, and dog, fetch my slippers. That's not what I'm talking about. Like, you're just the leader of the household. You're the one that sets the tone, the vibe, right? You're there to help everybody. If my wife's having a rough day, I'm the rock, as she likes to say. I am supposed to be her rock. I'm supposed to be my son's rock. There's a lot of responsibility for a man. You cannot carry that responsibility if you're acting like a child still. You have to lead, and you have to let them know you two, or however many there are, right? If you have multiple kids, you are number one. But then you also have to let your kids know, my wife comes first. I think I talked about this on a video a while back where I saw an interesting video, and the guy was like, when the kids were mouthing back to his mom or his wife, he said, hey, the kid's got in like double trouble because he was like, number one, you don't talk to my wife like that. And then he said, number two, you don't talk to your mother like that. Right. And I think that's a perfect lesson to teach your kids, because again, that teaches them what to expect, what to look for when they get older. Right. Do you want if you have a daughter, do you want her to grow up and find a guy that's a half-assed lazy bum that doesn't really want to lead the family, that she has to do everything for? No, you don't. So you have to lead the way from the get-go so that she knows this is what I expect. If you were to ask me, if you say, DL, where'd you learn all your lessons how to treat women? I'll tell you exactly. It's very simple. My dad. My dad taught me those lessons. He didn't sit down with any kind of book. He just did them. I watched how he acted. And then I grew up, and in some ways, I became like him. Other ways, not so much. He's not as mouthy as me. That's probably for the better. So you're the example for the rest of your family. And that's a lot of shoulder to bear. And you cannot be that if you do not have the right mindset. And when it comes to your kids, they need to know, hey, you will take mom's side in front of them. Like my son, he almost never gets in trouble. But when he does, I almost always side with my wife, with exactly one exception that, my wife does not let me forget. Not in a bad way. I'm not talking trash about her. I'm just saying, like, this is the typical wife thing. They remember things for a long time. And I scolded her one time because I thought she, was a little bit out of line. We're not going to tell the story. You don't need to embarrass anybody. But I'm just saying, like, with one exception, I have always stood with my wife. And the only reason I made that exception is because I think in the family, part of what I expect our family to do is, number one, we understand the roles. And then number two, we do not violate these roles unless it becomes a big deal, right? Unless it's something very, very important. Because here's the thing. There are rules, right? In society, in families, everywhere. There are rules. And there are sometimes situations for which the rules might necessarily need to be broken. And so I want to teach my son that, yes, there are these rules. There are these expectations. You can expect that your mommy and I are going to be on the same page, with a very rare exception. So don't even expect it. That's how rare it should be. Don't expect that to happen very often, like almost never. And you could even make the argument that it should never happen, right? I mean, I can't say that, that every single thing I do is 100% correct. I mean, I like to think so, but not necessarily. Okay? So that is what your job as a man is. It's to lead the family. It's to set the tone, the vibe for the family. And sometimes I don't agree, like my wife and I don't agree with each other on something. We show a united front, and then we pull each other aside and go, hey, like my wife has told me before, she'll pull me aside and she'll say, hey, I just want you to know, I don't know if you realize this, but when when your son, this and that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then she'll lay it out and she'll just kind of present her case to me. And sometimes I'll go, that's a really good point. You're right. I didn't think about that. Right. Or sometimes, I'll disagree. Right. And then whatever. Right. We have this communication. We talk to each other about these kind of things. And so what he sees is united front. So as he's growing up through the years, his expectation is, when I get married, I should have a united front with my wife, and therefore my kids will be subject to us, and they are expected to obey and listen. And if he gets out of line, then I say, and part of that united front is ultimately teaching him how to behave in the world around him. So, for instance, what I try to do is not intervene as much as possible. And the reason for that is I want him to respect his mom. I want him to respect my wife, right? I want him to respect, those two roles, period, without me having to intervene. If I intervened every single time, then it would basically take away from her authority over him. And so I try not to intervene. Like I try not, and I don't mean like intervene on his behalf and say, hey, you're wrong. I'm talking about, I try not to intervene and go, hey, you knock that off. Now, again, it doesn't happen very often because somehow I was blessed with a goody two-shoe. I don't know how that happened. Okay. But what I'm trying to get, what I'm trying to point out is all these different areas where as a man, you have a certain level of responsibility. And that responsibility is all tied in to your mindset about the family, about your spouse, about your children, and yes, even about your mom. You should love your mama, period, right? Now, I'm not, some people might say, well, what if my mom was in general, you should love your mama, okay? And so I'm not telling you not to love your mama. I'm not telling you to have a lot of, not to have a lot of respect for your mama. I'm not telling you that there aren't times where the family has to give you a little bit of space to, for something related to your mama, right? Like I just told you, my mom was dying of cancer in 2016, and I went to visit her 4 different times. I said, hey, I'll be back. I'm going to go visit my mom for like 3 to 4 or 5 days. And then, my wife stayed home, and then I would come back. And then once I came back, now I'm back into the same role. I am the husband. My wife is my wife, and we had no son at the time. And so therefore, that is now, my focus on being the husband, managing the house, right? Keeping the vibe. And I've said this before, I think it's a husband's duty to really manage the vibe in the house. If I come in, let's say my wife's in a bad mood for some reason, right? And if I come in and she maybe is in a bad mood, maybe she's had a rough day, then maybe I do things to kind of help ease her stress a little bit, or maybe I say, hey, you need to go and, take some time for yourself, right? Like go to the gym or something like that, something that she likes, something to help her decompress and help her de-stress, right? That's my job, because guess what? People aren't always so good at that. Even me. And I say it's her job to kind of do the same with me. But I look at it and I say, I'm the man. I'm leading. And a lot of men want to lead. But when you give answers like that, you're not leading. And so don't expect to lead. And if you end up in a sexless marriage, I'm not going to say that that is the complete reason why. There's plenty of reasons for a sexless marriage. Some of them are going to be on the wife. Some of them are going to be on the husband. And some of them will be on both. Okay? So we're only talking right now in this particular one context. And so it is possible that if you are not a man that's prioritizing your wife, then there are other things that you're also not doing, which make it a little bit difficult for her to want to be intimate. So men, get your head screwed on straight. All right, folks, I think that's going to be it for tonight. I just wanted to come in quickly, do a little show, as I promised, because one of the things I tell my son, I say, hey boy, we honor our word here. If we tell someone we're going to do it, we do it. And, that's a lesson that I'm teaching him. And, some people fail. That happens. But for the most part, I try to keep my word. And so I said I was going to have a show tonight at 9. Not going to have a show tomorrow. That's what I'm going to do. And so I was able to come up with something. So hopefully you enjoyed it. In the comments, if you're watching this after the fact, or maybe if you have a thought later, come back and let me know what you think. Tell me your thoughts. Like, did I make the case well, right? Did I miss, some particular point? Is there something maybe I should have addressed? Is there a question you have? Whatever. Just pop it in the comments later. I'll check them out. But for now, I will see you guys Monday. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people, and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time, but for now, I'm out.